He paid me to be his wife. Then I took everything. Part 2. Chapter 9, Venom in Silk. The Clarke Foundation's private luncheon was held in the rooftop garden of an exclusive midtown club, a carefully curated affair, just 20 guests, hand-picked media, and the illusion of effortless class. Peonies floated in iced water. A harpist played near the lavender wall. Everything was perfect, which made the Venom all the more invisible. May had been seated beside Vivian Clarke at the head table, a move clearly orchestrated by Vivian herself. Damon was across the garden, deep in conversation with a UN ambassador and a governor's wife, too far to hear what was about to unfold. Perfect. May wore a dove grey dress, hair in a sleek low bun, diamonds subtle but strategic. She looked every inch the obedient billionaire's bride. Vivian wore blood-red Chanel and a smile sharp enough to slice glass. Their forks hadn't touched the lobster bisque. "I'll make this quick," Vivian said, swirling her wine. May sipped her water and said nothing. Just let the ice gather behind her eyes. "You're charming," Vivian continued. "Pretty, well-postured, deceptively composed. And I admit, I underestimated you." "Thank you," May said evenly. That sounded almost like a compliment. Vivian's smile didn't move. It wasn't. A long pause. The harpist changed keys. Vivian leaned in slightly. "I've dealt with actresses before," she murmured. "Women who think the right smile can turn fiction into fact. But Damon isn't yours. He never will be. This little arrangement, it's temporary. So I'm going to give you one piece of advice, from woman to woman." She set her wine glass down gently. "Stay in your lane." May tilted her head slightly. "You mean the one paved by my husband?" Vivian's eyes narrowed. "He's not your husband. He's your employer." May's smile was polite, serene, and pure performance. "Is there a difference in this family?" Vivian leaned closer. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "Push me, and I'll ruin you." May took her time placing her napkin in her lap. "Of course," she said sweetly. "I wouldn't dream of stepping on your legacy." Vivian straightened, satisfied. May gave her the performance she wanted, the nod, the silence, the illusion of deference. But something shifted behind May's eyes. And Vivian missed it. May walked the 5 blocks home alone. Damon had been delayed for another interview. She declined the car. She needed the silence. The city's hum. The noise to hide the thoughts running wild behind her smile. Vivian Clarke was more than a socialite. More than a sister protecting a family name. She was careful. Controlled. Calculated. And now May was sure. Vivian knew something. The warning hadn't been personal. It had been tactical. Vivian was playing defense because May was getting close. Closer than she realized. Damon poured himself a drink, but May didn't sit beside him like she usually did. Instead, she stood by the window, watching the skyline like it owed her answers. "Your sister doesn't like me," she said without turning. Damon chuckled. "Vivian doesn't like anyone. She barely tolerates me. She said I should stay in my lane." Damon's eyes flicked up. "Did she?" "She was very polite about it," May said, voice light as silk. "Almost surgical. She's protective. She's territorial." He took a slow sip. "Do I need to talk to her?" "No," May said, turning to face him. "But I will." Damon raised a brow. "You sure you want to play that game with her?" She smiled, and for once, it wasn't polite. It was primal. "I don't play games I'm not ready to win." She opened the hidden journal, added a new page. Subject, Vivian Clarke. Obsessively image-conscious. Aggressive toward outsiders. Connected to Dad's firing. Warned me intentionally. Why? What is she hiding? She flipped back to her father's file. The timing. The signatures. The department where the complaint originated. It all led back to Vivian's oversight team. She thinks I'm an actress playing rich. But she doesn't see the weapon I've become. I let her believe she scared me. Let her think she owns the room. But the closer I get, the more I smell blood under her perfume. She tapped her pen once, twice. Then wrote one more word beneath Vivian's name. Hunter. And below it, next. Chapter 10, Cutting Strings. Money makes noise when it moves, but silence when it disappears. May sat at the Clarke Tower Executive Lounge, sipping an Americano from fine bone china, pretending to scroll fashion blogs on her phone. But behind her neutral expression, something darker churned. The trap was ready. 3 days ago, she'd found the report hidden in a digital folder buried under a code name, VV2_X. It was marked confidential, labeled preliminary, but clear in meaning, a proposed restructuring plan for Clarke Global's Asia-Pacific division. Layoffs. Outsourced contracts. Tax shelter abuse. It hadn't been approved yet, but it was real, and damaging if seen out of context. Exactly what May needed. She sent it from an encrypted channel at 3:17 a.m. To one source. Anonymous. A notoriously rogue market whistleblower blog called Mercury Data. Within 12 hours, the markets reacted. Breaking: Clarke Global eyes massive restructuring in Asia. Leaked docs suggest cost-cutting, tax havens. By 9 a.m., Clarke stock had dropped 4.3%. By 10 o'clock, it had triggered auto-halt protocols. The board was furious. Shareholders spooked. And Damon Clarke's phone wouldn't stop ringing. The atmosphere inside the boardroom was pure combustion. Executives sat tense, jaws clenched, sipping scalding black coffee like it might stop the bleeding. Damon stood at the head of the table, remote in one hand, a live feed of the plummeting stock graph on screen behind him. First, he said, voice ice cold, this was a leak. Second, it was internal. Third, his gaze swept the room. Someone in this building either made a mistake or has a target painted on my back. Silence. Then the CFO cleared his throat. The leak wasn't from accounting. We triple-checked document permissions. Legal chimed in. Preliminary reports were limited access. 5 people. 6, if we count. Everyone turned as he glanced not so subtly at May. She was standing by the window, hands loosely clasped behind her back, gazing out at the skyline like the chaos didn't touch her. Miss Roberts has no clearance, Damon said flatly. But she was recently granted access to internal archives, legal replied. By you. May turned, slowly, with the grace of a cat who'd already eaten the canary. I read old personnel files, she said. Not trade data. I wouldn't even know what to look for. The board members murmured, unsure if that was sarcasm or submission. Damon's jaw flexed once. Then he said, we'll handle this internally. Meeting adjourned. He poured a drink, didn't offer her one. She didn't ask. Something's off, he said. Besides your stock. He gave her a look. She held her ground. You didn't leak it, he asked directly. May stepped closer. Do you really think I'd sabotage you? Us. Damon didn't answer right away. Then, you're smart enough. She smiled softly. And if I did, would you admire it or destroy me? He didn't flinch. Both. A charged silence passed. She leaned forward, gently brushing invisible lint from his lapel. Maybe the real question is, if I'm the only one you don't trust, why do you let me sleep next to you every night? He didn't answer. Didn't blink. Just stared. And in that moment, she saw it. He was starting to watch her. Not just look. Not just measure. Study. May turned away first. Victory or danger, she wasn't sure. He pulled up the server logs on his private terminal. The document was accessed at 2:03 a.m. 3 IP addresses. One was his. One was Marcus, his CFO. The third was a temporary terminal. Guest access. He typed in a query. The logs confirmed what he didn't want to admit. That terminal had been active in the archive suite on the 47th floor. 3 nights ago. After midnight. Security footage, gone. Loop failure. He sat back. May. She glued a screenshot of the Mercury Data headline beside her notes on Vivian and Bryce. Under it, she wrote. Strike 1. A crack, not a collapse. But enough to make him bleed. He suspects me now. Good. He should. This isn't just revenge anymore. It's a chessboard. And I've just captured my first piece. She stared at the stock graph one more time before turning out the light. Chapter 11, The Ghost File. It started with a name. James A. Roberts. Damon sat alone in his private study, lights low, fingers steepled as the screen before him displayed the search results. The servers had finally coughed up a forgotten file, unearthed after he ordered an internal audit of old terminated personnel looking for anomalies. He hadn't been looking for May. He hadn't been looking for her father. But the name stopped him cold. Position, Senior Structural Engineer, Clarke Infrastructure. Date hired, June 2013. Date terminated, January 2019. Reason for termination, mishandling of proprietary data, breach of NDA protocol, suspected transfer of blueprints to a third-party shell contractor, never confirmed. Attached to the report, a few internal memos. One bore his own digital signature, a delegation stamp for expedited clearance. Damon frowned. He didn't remember James Roberts. Not by name. Not by face. But now there was something eerily familiar about the archived photo grade, tired eyes, the haunted look of a man halfway between resignation and rage. May's eyes. He stared at the screen, stunned. And then he said aloud, "Lo. No. That's not possible." May returned home from a solo charity walk-through. Her heels clicked softly against the marble, her coat still damp with Manhattan rain. The penthouse smelled faintly of lavender oil diffusers and quiet judgment. Damon was waiting. Not with wine. Not with warmth. With the file open on his tablet. "You should sit," he said. May didn't. "What's wrong?" He turned the screen to her. "Do you recognize this name?" The moment her eyes landed on it, her body reacted before her mind could catch up. Jaw tight. Spine straight. James A. Roberts. Her father. Her heart galloped in her chest. She knew the look on her face betrayed something, but she didn't blink. "No," she said softly. Damon stood. "Really?" "Because this man was fired from Clarke Global. For corporate misconduct. The evidence was enough to bury his career." May stepped closer. And his last name is Roberts. Same as yours. There are thousands of people named Roberts. Engineers too," he said. "With your exact childhood address listed as his emergency contact." Silence. Something cracked in her voice. "Why are you digging into me?" "I'm not," Damon said. "I was digging into the leak. This came up by accident." He paused. "You never told me your father worked for Clarke Global. You never asked. And you never denied it. I didn't think I needed to share every inch of my past." Damon studied her, too quiet now. His voice was measured, but his eyes were different. Distant. "You're not just some stranger from a diner," he said finally. "You knew this name before you saw it." "Of course I did," May snapped. "He was my father. And your company destroyed him." Damon stiffened. "He was framed," she continued. "He didn't sell anything. He didn't leak anything. He was loyal. Until someone made him the fall guy and threw him into a furnace so your executives could keep their hands clean. I never. Damon began. You signed the paperwork. He hesitated. It was a delegation stamp. I had no reason to question it. And now you do, she said. Because I'm not walking away. Silence again. Heavy this time. He walked to the window, hands in his pockets, face shadowed. Why did you really marry me, May? She didn't answer. He turned toward her, voice quieter, broken. Was this about him from the start? May's mask was back now. Seamless. Her eyes unreadable. No, she said. Not just about him. And then she left the room. He sat at his desk again, reviewing every page. Every email. Every decision with his name attached. And yet the audit trail ended too cleanly. Reports scrubbed. Notes redacted. Final investigations inconclusive. The deeper he looked, the more he realized, he hadn't been told the whole story back then. Maybe not even half of it. He whispered to the dark. What did we do to him? And for the first time in years, he felt doubt, real doubt, settle in his chest like lead. He found the file. I saw it in his eyes, the fear, the confusion, the beginning of a shift. He doesn't know what really happened to my father. Not entirely. And for the first time, I saw something I didn't expect. Doubt. Maybe even guilt. It's not enough. But it's a crack. And I'll split it wide open. Chapter 12, Lines Crossed. The storm rolled in just after midnight. Lightning slashed across the sky like a warning, and rain smeared the city into streaks of grey and glass. The penthouse was a quiet museum of tension, shadows long, lights low. May stood barefoot by the window, robe wrapped tight, eyes on the skyline but mind adrift. She hadn't written in her journal tonight. She couldn't. Because she didn't know what to write anymore. She didn't know what to feel. Her father's name had landed between her and Damon like a ghost dragging chains. And instead of collapsing, the man she'd blamed for years had looked broken. Uncertain. Human. Worse, he'd looked at her like she was the only thing left that made sense. She hated it. She hated him. She hated that a part of her didn't. Behind her, the floor creaked. She didn't have to look to know it was Damon. Can't sleep? He asked, voice rough with too many unspoken things. No. Damon walked to the bar, poured 2 fingers of scotch. He hesitated before offering it to her. She took it. No thanks. No words. Just a shared drink between enemies who didn't quite know where the war had ended. They stood in silence for a moment, the glass cool in her hand, the air too charged to breathe. You didn't answer me earlier, he said quietly. May turned to him. Which part? Why you married me? She hesitated. If I said it wasn't just for the money, I wouldn't believe you, he said, but his tone didn't hold the usual cruelty. Instead, it sounded like a man begging for an excuse to believe anything else. She moved closer. And if I said it wasn't for revenge? He looked at her. Really looked? That would scare me more. She reached for the glass in his hand and took it from him, setting both drinks down on the table. Then, without permission or warning, she kissed him. It wasn't careful. It wasn't for optics. It wasn't even strategic. It was messy. Real. Human. And Damon responded like a man who'd been starving for something he didn't know he needed. His hands tangled in her hair. Her robe fell open slightly, but neither of them noticed. She hated how easy it was to fall into him. He hated how natural it felt to let her. They kissed like people on the edge of truth, the edge of betrayal, the edge of a cliff they couldn't climb down from. Clothes dropped like lies on the hardwood. His lips on her neck. Her hands in his shirt. It wasn't careful. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate. Like two people burning from within, trying to set each other on fire to see who would survive it. The bed creaked beneath them. The storm screamed outside. Inside, it was silent except for the sound of breath and bodies and breaking lines. Because the contract was dead now. There were no clauses for this. No rules. No exit plan. May woke before him, tangled in white sheets, her hair a storm across her shoulder. She sat up slowly, watching Damon sleep. His jaw was slack. One hand curled near the pillow. Vulnerable. Human. How could this be the same man who signed off on my father's death? And yet, last night hadn't felt like a lie. That's what scared her the most. She got up quietly, wrapped herself in the robe, and walked to the window. The storm had passed. The city was glass again. Behind her, Damon stirred. Leaving so soon? He asked, voice husky. I never said I was staying. He sat up, studying her. Is this where you pretend nothing happened? No, she said. This is where I pretend it didn't change anything. He nodded, slow. But it did. She didn't answer. Because he was right. Her handwriting was shakier than usual. Last night, I crossed a line I drew in blood. Not because I forgave him. Not because I forgot. But because I needed to know if the man I hated, was still worth hating. And now I'm not sure what scares me more, that I felt something, or that I wanted to. Chapter 13, The Stolen Company. Power doesn't announce itself. It whispers. And this morning, it whispered through a seemingly insignificant trade filing that would ripple through Clarke Global by noon. Damon hadn't spoken much about what happened that night. Neither had May. But the silence had changed shape. He watched her more closely now. Listened more carefully. And May could feel it, she was no longer the quiet contract bride in the shadows. She was a presence. Which made her next move all the more dangerous and necessary. The news came in the form of an emergency call from Clarke Global's Director of Holdings. Damon answered it during a quarterly meeting. Calm. Casual. Until his eyes narrowed. What do you mean it was sold? May sat across the table, seemingly engrossed in a digital portfolio on her tablet. Damon ended the call and looked up at his board. Who sold Fortress Biotech? Blank stares. What the hell is Fortress Biotech? Asked one of the newer shareholders. It was a wholly owned Clarke subsidiary, Damon said, voice tight. A minor lab in Switzerland. Mostly research IP. Dormant. Nothing flashy. Until someone bought it. Yes, Damon replied. Quietly. For 10 million. Filed through a third-party European holding firm. He looked at Marcus, his CFO. I want a full trace on that acquisition. I want names, proxies, buyer chains. Now. May stood in a borrowed office space, a minimalist CEO working suite tucked inside a non-profit foundation building, rented under a shell name, Clara Holdings Ltd. She didn't use her face. She used her voice. And the voice was calm, professional, and cloaked in legal distance. She orchestrated the purchase of Fortress Biotech using a quiet team of attorneys, acting on behalf of an emerging clean tech firm in Eastern Europe. In truth, the buyers were strawmen. Everything led back to her and no one would see it unless they knew where to look. She knew Fortress wasn't valuable now. But buried in its dormant files were classified patents on an experimental lithium extraction technique. A gold mine. But this wasn't about profit. It was about proving she could take something from Damon Clarke without him seeing her hand. Until now. Damon stood at the window, hands in his pockets, eyes on the skyline. May entered, elegant as ever, in a black wrap dress that shimmered like ink. She poured a drink without asking. You've been quiet, she said. You've been busy, he replied. A beat of silence. Fortress by attack, he said finally. Someone stole it. May sipped her wine. You can't steal what someone forgot to lock up. His gaze flicked to her. It was you, wasn't it? She didn't smile. Didn't lie. Just met his eyes and said, does it matter? Yes. Why? Because you're my wife. And wives don't make power plays behind their husband's back. She tilted her head, slow. You hired a symbol. Not a strategist. You wanted someone silent and soft. You never asked if I could think like you. He stepped closer. And why Fortress? Why now? She didn't flinch. Because I wanted to see if I could. And I wanted to know what it felt like to win without breaking any laws. Damon stared at her, unreadable. You're not just dangerous, May. You're smart. She smiled. That's the real problem, isn't it? He reached out suddenly not to touch her, but to take the glass from her hand. He set it down on the marble countertop between them. You're playing with fire. I am the fire, she said softly. He reviewed the full acquisition chain. The lawyers. The shell company. The buyer. No fingerprints. But the style? It felt familiar. Surgical. Elegant. Quiet. Just like her. And yet, he couldn't prove it. She's not just inside the game, he thought. She's moving pieces while I'm still looking at the board. He didn't know whether to admire her more or fear her. She taped a stock transfer slip next to the Mercury Data article. Today I took something real. Something Damon didn't think mattered. But now he's watching me the way I've been watching him. That's good. Eyes on me means he's not looking at what I'm building behind him. Let him be suspicious. That's how I know I'm winning. Chapter 14, Face to Face. It wasn't a digital trail that led him there. It was a box. An old, dusty storage container from Clarke Global's litigation archives, something slated for shredding and quietly forgotten. A paralegal flagged it during a records transfer and forwarded it up the chain because it bore Damon's name. Most of the contents were dated reports, memos from mid-level executives, obsolete hardware specs. But buried beneath the paperwork was something much heavier. A manila folder. Labeled, Roberts, J.A. Damon opened it with cold fingers. Inside were 5 photos clipped to a stapled complaint, a non-disclosure summary, and unexpectedly a printout of a scanned whistleblower submission. One of the photos was old, faded, poorly lit. But he recognized the eyes. James Roberts in a courthouse hallway, flanked by 2 Clarke lawyers. The other image, paper-clipped behind it, was grainier. A young woman in the background. Teenager. Standing by the water fountain, shoulders hunched in oversized sleeves, watching her father from a distance. The face was unmistakable. May. She came home late. Her makeup was still perfect, but her heels were in one hand. The night had been long, a gallery launch for one of Damon's investment darlings. She'd smiled, kissed, clinked glasses with millionaires. But she'd felt his eyes on her the whole night. He was waiting for her now. Not in their bedroom. Not at the bar. In the library. Where he never waited unless something was about to break. May walked in, aware immediately that something had shifted. He stood beside the fireplace, a folder in his hand. No drink. No smirk. Just a man holding something that might have finally shattered all of it. You lied to me, he said. She didn't answer. Not yet. He held up the photo. Her father's face. Her own, younger, behind him. Tell me this isn't you. Silence. Tell me you didn't walk into my life with a plan, Damon said, his voice low but serrated. May's throat burned. Her hands stayed steady. I didn't lie, she said carefully. I just didn't tell you everything. Because you knew, he said. You knew who I was. What I'd done. You knew the moment you walked into that conference room. Her voice cracked. He was my father. You married me out of revenge. No, she snapped. I married you because your company destroyed the only good man I ever knew and I wanted to look you in the eye while I made you pay. Silence fell. Thick. Devastating. Damon's breath was shallow. May didn't cry. Not yet. But her voice trembled as she spoke. They made him the villain. Your people. Your sister. Bryce. They buried his testimony. They broke him down and threw away what was left. I watched him die by degrees. And then I watched you smile on magazine covers while my mother pawned her wedding ring to pay hospital bills. I didn't know, Damon said. May, I didn't. Exactly, she said bitterly. You signed the orders and walked away. You handed down the sentence and never looked at the names. Damon looked stunned. A man watching the floor crack beneath him. I was told your father was leaking sensitive IP. Selling it to Vailtech, he said. There were 3 witnesses. I trusted them. Your witnesses were liars, she said. I found their names. I found the payment records. They were incentivized to make him the scapegoat. She stepped closer now. Voice softer, but heavier. You didn't pull the trigger. But you let them load the gun. He turned away from her, pacing once, twice. The photo dropped to the floor. She stooped to pick it up. He said nothing. Just stood with his back to her, hands clenched at his sides. I wanted to hate you, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I came here to hate you. And now, he asked, his voice hoarse. I don't know, she whispered. He knows. Finally. I didn't plan for it to come out like this. Not so soon. Not so raw. But the look in his eyes, it wasn't fury. It was something worse. Regret. If I'm right, he didn't betray my father. He enabled it. Looked away. Delegated his conscience. And that makes him something more dangerous than a villain. A man who could be forgiven. She stared at the photo for a long time before she wrote again. The plan is crumbling. Not because it failed. But because I no longer know if I want to win it. Chapter 15, The Fire Between Them. The silence between them was no longer just uncomfortable. It was combustible. 3 days had passed since Damon found the photo. 3 days of no staged appearances, no PR-friendly brunches or soft interviews. 3 days of polite coldness in public and glacial tension in private. May had moved back into the guest bedroom without a word. He hadn't followed. He hadn't asked her to explain. But he'd started watching her again. Not the way a husband watches a wife. The way a man watches the person who could ruin him or save him. Tonight, that silence broke. The storm outside hadn't come yet, but the sky threatened one. Dark. Heavy. Ready to fall. May stood in the penthouse living room, facing the city in a sleeveless black dress. She didn't hear Damon approach, but she felt his presence like static, heavy, and everywhere. He said nothing at first. Just stood across the room from her, the firelight between them casting sharp gold shadows. Then. Tell me everything. May didn't turn. Everything. I want the truth, Damon said. All of it. Every lie. Every reason. Every plan you made before you walked into my life and signed that contract. She closed her eyes. Breathed in once. Out. Then she turned to face him. Her voice was flat, but her eyes were wild with something raw. You want the truth? Fine. I married you to destroy you. She stepped closer. Slowly. Deliberately. I planned it. Every part. From the second your lawyer walked into that diner and handed me that envelope. I said yes before I even read the contract because I knew your name. I knew what Clarke Global did to my father. I knew what you signed. And I wanted to see you burn. Damon didn't move. Didn't breathe. May kept going. I learned your company inside out. Every board member. Every asset. Every buried deal. I didn't want your money. I didn't want your name. I wanted your empire in flames. A beat passed. Her voice cracked. But somewhere in the middle of pretending to love you, I stopped pretending. Damon's throat moved. A swallow. Quiet. Dangerous. And what do you feel now? He asked. She stepped even closer, until they were only inches apart. I hate you, she whispered. For what you did. For what you didn't do. For what you looked away from. A pause. But I also. She closed her eyes, ashamed of the word. I love you, she said, barely audible. Even if I didn't mean to. Even if I never wanted to. His jaw flexed. You used me. I used the man I thought you were, she whispered. The careless king with blood on his hands. And what am I now? I don't know, she said. That's what terrifies me. A long, unbearable silence stretched between them. Then Damon stepped forward and grabbed her face, not rough, but like he couldn't stop himself. Do you think I didn't feel it? He said, his voice ragged. That every time you looked at me, it didn't make me wonder what I was becoming. She stared at him. Fire between them. Skin flushed. Eyes filled with a truth too big for words. You made me feel like I could be someone else, he said. And then you ripped it away. You deserved it. I probably did. Another pause. Then he kissed her. Hard. Desperate. Not polished. Not cold. Like he wanted to drown in her. She kissed him back just as fiercely because hate and love had never been opposites for them. They had always been fuel. They burned together. Hands in hair. Teeth clashing. Desperation bleeding into need. And when they finally pulled apart, breathless, bruised, wrecked. He rested his forehead against hers. We're a mess, he whispered. Beautifully, she said. They sat on the rug in front of the fireplace, side by side. Their hands touched, barely. May stared into the flames. Everything I did, every move I made, it for my father. I know. But now, when I think about what I want next, I don't know if revenge is enough. Damon turned to her. Then don't burn it all down. Maybe I already have, she whispered. But maybe we build something from the ash. She didn't write much. Just a single line. I told him. And he stayed. Chapter 16, The Break. He didn't say goodbye. No slammed doors. No press release. No dramatic standoff. Damon Clarke simply vanished. 1 minute, he was at the head of the empire. The next, he was gone. No texts. No calls. No clues. May sat in Damon's usual chair at the head of the table. The room was chaos. Executives panicked over stock drops, media spin, shareholder panic. His absence wasn't just personal, it was corporate disruption on a global scale. The media had already latched onto it. Where is Damon Clarke? CEO missing for 48 hours, fiancé silent. Is May Roberts behind the disappearance of billionaire tech titan? May didn't flinch. Not even when one of the board members asked if she knew where he was. I'm as surprised as the rest of you, she said, voice smooth as glass. It wasn't a lie. Not exactly. But it felt like victory. For a moment. The place felt like a mausoleum now. Too still. Too clean. Too untouched. His absence was everywhere: the unmade bed, the unfinished scotch, the stack of contracts waiting for a signature that would never come. And May, curled on the couch in one of his dress shirts, stared at nothing. She should have felt powerful. She should have felt triumphant. He was gone. She'd won. Except, why did it feel like a hollow crown? The front door opened just after dusk. She heard it, the lock, the quiet thud, the long silence afterward. She stood slowly. Damon was there. Drenched from the rain. Eyes dark, beard rough, clothes wrinkled. But alive. Not angry. Not triumphant. Just, changed. Where the hell have you been? May asked, voice sharp, too full. I went looking for the truth, he said. And I found it. He dropped a flash drive on the table between them. I found the original audit reports. The whistleblower files. Not the sanitized versions. She picked up the flash drive, confused. I thought you destroyed them. I did. Or so I believed. But an old compliance officer retired, dying, kept backups. He handed them to me in a hospice bed and said, your sister lied. And so did your board. He met her eyes, wet hair dripping down his collar. I didn't ruin your father, May. I was misled. He looked hollow now. Stripped of everything but his truth. The complaint about your father? It was manufactured. The evidence against him doctored. The witness reports coerced. By who? May asked, voice barely a whisper. Vivian. And Bryce. May staggered back like he'd hit her. No, she said. That's not Vivian, didn't even work with him. She did, Damon said. Quietly. She orchestrated the paper trail. Buried the whistleblower file. Then she had me sign the approval for dismissal, knowing I wouldn't question it. Why? Because your father had uncovered something offshore accounts tied to Bryce's acquisitions. They needed him gone. They needed a fall guy. May's hands trembled. All this time, you weren't the enemy. No, he said, voice rough. But I let myself be the executioner. I let it happen because I didn't look close enough. She turned away, face tight, eyes burning. Do you expect me to forgive you? No. Silence. But I thought you deserved the truth. He reached into his coat pocket and set a sealed envelope beside the flash drive. Inside are the full original files. The signed confession from the compliance officer. Copies of the forged documents. Everything. He took a deep breath. I'm done protecting anyone who did this. Then he walked past her. Toward the bedroom. Not for sleep but to gather ammunition. She stepped out onto the balcony, eyes wide, heart beating in a rhythm she didn't recognize. He hadn't run. He hadn't retaliated. He came back with the truth. And it changed everything. He wasn't the man who destroyed my father. He was the man who looked away. And now, he's the only man willing to burn everything to make it right. I wanted revenge. But maybe what I really needed, was the truth.
Because every broken heart deserves a comeback. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more emotional romance every week. Hit like, drop a comment, and ring the bell so you never miss a moment of betrayal, redemption, and powerful love. And don't keep the drama to yourself, share this story with someone who lives for twists just like you. Thanks for listening, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is becoming unforgettable.